Okay, good afternoon, Anatomy and Physiology. This is Mr. McGee. We're going to analyze our potato core osmosis results today, but we're going to do it a little different because of my Y-Day class having the day of Halloween short. So let's go through this as quickly as we can. First, we've got two different tables here. This is for the two different results, and we're going to make a nice looking table and a graph. So the first thing we want to do is look at our data. This up here represents the salinity. And if you would, we're going to add a title that corresponds with this row. Let's go ahead and put salt, and we'll put our unit as a gram, and we're going to say that's for every 300 milliliters of water. So the salt for every 300 milliliters of water. We can go ahead and do the exact same thing down here. If I copy this, I can paste it, or you could just retype it. So now that tells us this is the amount of salt added for every 300 grams of water. But we also want to do another thing, that is add the mean and the standard deviation. And we'll do that again down here, but I'm just going to copy this to save time. So now we've got the basic things in our table. Let's go ahead and, let's go ahead and tidy it up a little bit more. First thing we're going to want to do, I guess, after all this is let's go ahead and put a box around it. It makes it a little easier to see. Just like that, you come up here and click for the box. And we're going to want to put a title up here. So I'm going to click on russet potatoes. I want this centered over the entire table. So I'm going to highlight this entire area, go up here to merge, and it should merge that. Then come over here and click center. We're going to do the same thing on sweet potatoes. Come up here to, merge it, and then come over here and center it. I must have clicked something when I did that. There we go, merge and center. Next thing we're going to want to do is, I like to kind of highlight these backgrounds a little bit because if I do that, it's easier for me to see. So go ahead and add a color to that. I don't care what color you use, but hopefully it's something that would show up on printable paper. Nothing too crazy. Let's go ahead and add these colors to that as well. Takes a moment. And so now this shows us what data we're working with and what we have to calculate. So now that we've done that, we want to retitle this just a little bit. Let's go ahead and add a more appropriate title to the russet potatoes. Instead of just saying russet potatoes, let's say this is the percent change in mass of russet potatoes. And while I'm at it, let's go ahead and make that bold because it looks a little bit nicer. And we'll do the same thing down here. Percent change in mass of sweet potatoes. And we're going to go ahead and bold it by clicking on the B. Or you can do Control B if you're on a Windows computer. There we go. Now ask yourself, does this look nice and neat? Can you understand everything that's labeled in rows accordingly? Having said that, now let's go ahead and calculate our results. First, we need to go ahead and calculate, we need to calculate the mean. To do the mean, we click on the square that we want calculated, and then we need to do the following. Click equals, and now we're going to type average. Don't just rely on its suggestion, and don't click, because if you notice, it's trying to include this top box, and we don't want that. We need to click on and manually tell it what is it. Don't click on anything but group 1 through group 5, and you can hit enter. Same thing, do the same thing here, average, and then again, click on a cell that lets you enter it manually because you want to make sure that you're telling the computer what to enter. The computer is not that intelligent, and it wants to calculate things automatically. If you don't know, just click on a cell and look up here, C3 through C7. That would be these cells, C3 through C7. Again, as long as it's not using the top row, you should be good. Now, you could do that for each and every one of these cells, or you could just copy this cell there, and then you can paste that cell, and it will automatically calculate. Again, do it down here. Average, and let's go ahead and manually tell it. That's not going to work. We're going to manually tell it to do group 1 through group 5 and enter. And let's go ahead and copy and paste. That way we can save ourselves a little time. Now with standard deviation, let's do the same thing. If you recall, standard deviation is essentially looking at the average range of the data. So we'll do standard deviation. I just type in stdev, and don't do the suggestion, do the manual entry. Group 1 through group 5. Click enter. And again, you can copy this and paste it across the rows and do it again down here. stdev, don't do the suggestion, do the manual entry, group 1 through 5. If you get any numbers different than what I got, then you must have done it wrong. Okay, everything looks nice, but we're still not done because notice the decimal points are off. Some of these are rounded to 1 decimal point, some are rounded to 2. We want to make this consistent. So what I like to do is let's just highlight all the data like this, go up here to these numbers, and you'll see you can add zeros or remove zeros. Let's get it rounded to 2 decimal places. And we'll do the same thing down here, round it to 2 decimal places. Now, a rule of thumb in science is anything that's calculated, such as the mean and standard deviation, we're going to add 1 more decimal place to 3. Again, do that for the bottom row. We're going to add 1 more round of precision to its measurement than the raw data has. So again, if these are rounded to 2, you're good, because that's what we measured. And if the calculated mean and standard deviation is 3, you are good to go. With that said, let's go ahead and make a graph. To do the graph, you simply have to come up here and click Chart, just like this. And what we want to do is change this chart type here to a line graph. And now what we need to do is tell the computer what's our data range. And this is a little confusing, especially if you used Microsoft Excel. Our data range, clear that out. We're going to tell it it's our mean. Okay? Now we'll add another range and tell it it's the mean of the sweet potatoes. And now that we've got that, we're going to click. Now notice it looks nothing like a graph that we want to, and that's partially because the computer's not that smart. So we're going to have to come down here all the way to the bottom and switch rows and columns. And now that we've done that, because you can see what it's doing to the computer, now that we've got the rows and columns switched, we're going to tell the computer to align it vertically. There we go. And now by doing that, it's assuming that the mean is actually plotted on the vertical axis. That's why we aligned it vertically. Next thing we want to do is tell it what's the x-axis labels. You click here, and of course that would be our water salinity concentration. Now that we've clicked on that, it should be pretty obvious. Okay, now that we have this, we can move this graph over a little bit more so we can see it a little bit easier. And now what we're going to do is try to customize a few things up here. So I'm going to click over there, and I'm going to go down here to, I'm going to come over here to Customize and Chart and Axis Titles. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a horizontal axis title, and that's going to go underneath here. Type in the text, what do I want for the horizontal axis? Well, I basically want it to be salt, the amount of salt added for every 300 milliliters of water. And with that said, it should pop up. Now you can change this font style if you want to. I'll let you mess with that. But let's go ahead now and add a vertical axis. Our vertical axis is going to be percent change in mass of the potatoes. Don't say russet or sweet because we've got both lines. And again, if you want to change the font and make this a little bigger, whoops, I lost my screen here. Give me just a second. If you want to come here and change the font maybe to something a little bigger that's easier to see, I'll let you decide if that's something you want to do. In this case, I'll make that a little bigger so it's a little easier to see. Okay? Next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to try to, actually I need to go back because I realized I made my font too big. Whoops. Go back here to 16. All right, the next thing we're going to want to do is try to add a chart title to this. I guess I should have said that ahead of time. What is this entire chart describing? Well, this is going to be osmosis of potato cores. And there you go. There's our chart title. Looks nice and neat up there. Again, if you want to center it or do anything like that, I'll let you decide how you want to do that because everybody's computer is going to be a little different. And I guess the last thing we want to do with this graph is just kind of scale it so it looks a little bit nicer. And what I mean is we want to make it nice and wide like this, but not, I guess it really just depends on your computer. You can stretch it like this. Notice what it does to the graph. And you can also squish it like this, but you want it to be appropriate so it fills the space. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on this, and we're going to go ahead and copy this as well as the tables. So come back under Google here, and you've got the Osmosis lab results assignment, you're going to come here and you're going to want to enter the graph in the table right there like this. I'm going to go ahead and delete this section, and I'm going to come over here to my graph and table, but first let's click on my russet potatoes, and I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paste this. And we're going to click paste unlinked. At least I think that's how I pasted it originally. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the sweet potatoes. Come over here, copy and paste it just like this. Whoops. Paste unlinked. And then we're going to want to go here back and copy our graph. And again, whoops, copy our graph and then paste it down here just like this. That's pretty much it. Once you get your graph copied and pasted, you can always change it if you want to, the style. And if we can try to get this on one page, that'd be great, but it really just depends. Now, having said that, whoops, we got it on one page just like this. That makes it look nice. When you guys are all done with your data and your table, you guys can come down here and answer the analysis questions. Make sure you click Turn In, and you have a nice day.